All right. Welcome to Minus 5 Degrees, a virtual pay it forward initiative for women designed to create 1 degree of separation between who you are and who you want to be. So this Women's History Month, we've decided to bring you a very simple goal. We want to galvanize a group of amazing, extraordinary women, have them talk about their careers, their next steps based on successes and failures they've had in the past, and help women around us create a blueprint for their careers. I am personally very excited about today's guest. Today's guest is going to be Kiana Eastmond. Kiana Rookz Eastmond is a powerhouse entrepreneur, music executive, and advocate for creative industries. As the founder of Sandbox Studios, one of Toronto's top music recording and artist development facilities, Rookz has worked with global icons as well as emerging local talent. A 5-time award-winning entrepreneur and sought-after speaker, she has delivered over 100 keynotes worldwide, sharing her insights on resilience, innovation, and self-determination. From overcoming homelessness at 15 to becoming a successful business leader, Rooks' journey is what we are here to talk about today. So let's get started. Welcome, Rooks.
What's going on?
What's going on? How you doing today?
I'm okay. The homeless part always takes me out now, you know. I'm just like,
I can
wow,
only imagine it does.
destitute. Yeah,
It was a real thing that
it
happened. I
was it
know it
was
seems
it was a real
crazy,
thing. It was real. It was real. It was real.
but it definitely really happened. Well, I am so
Mhm.
grateful to have you on this show today. It is truly a blessing, and I'm so happy I got to see you the other day too.
Yes.
I um I met Rooks, I don't know, years ago now when
Mhm.
Janae and I were in Canada. We were in Toronto doing one of our think tank dinner series, and Janae actually introduced us, and it was almost immediate that we like became like sisters. I
Mhm.
was in Toronto all the time. I was a part of an accelerator there. Rooks was kind enough to let me sleep on her couch in her studio. And so this is a very full circle, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to have you with me today, sis.
I was sleeping there too. We were both sleeping there.
We were both sleeping there.
We were both
But it
sleeping
was
there.
like the fact that the space was so small. Like not only were we sleeping there, like going to shower at the gym, like getting
Mm-hmm.
it together, but it was the things that were necessary for us to drive the
Mm-hmm.
business, for us to get to
A
where we need
hundred
to go.
percent.
And I
Hundred
was
percent.
super inspired like by you in general, like from the very jump, because a lot of people would be ashamed to say, oh, I was sleeping in my studio, or I stay in my studio. I have one of the most prolific music studios in the city of Toronto, in a major city, and I'm still sleeping
Yeah.
in my studio because in
Hmm.
order for things to keep growing, for me to keep going, I don't need the
Yeah.
overhead of a house.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just me, it's just my dog. And so that humility was something I like truly leaned into early, where it's like everything doesn't have to be so flashy, everything doesn't have to
Hmm.
be done for Instagram. Like
Hmm.
we actually make the sacrifices to see the things that we want to come to fruition. And that was a true lesson that you taught me very
Hundred
early
percent.
on. So
Great fate.
then create fate, right? And so that's
Great
what we're
fate. You
here to
got
do
to.
today.
Hmm.
All right, so let's jump right into it. We did mention, homeless at 15. I do want to talk
Hmm.
a little bit about that because your story is so much more than that.
Hmm.
But it is amazing to see how you were able to start there and to land here. So is there anything specific that happened that led you to homelessness? Um, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we live in a time that is so focused on a word or an identity or I often that's why I said, oh man, it's so weird to hear now because I'm starting to learn, especially in the recent years of my life, that like I was homeless in the sense that I did not have a room of my own. I did not have a home, but I was never homeless spiritually or mentally, right? Like I always in my mind was very grounded in who I was. And what led there was the fact that I was raised by an incredibly powerful woman, my mom, who was just kind of like, you always got to do the right thing, be yourself, or, walk in your own energy. And a part of that was me coming out really early. One day she just like, I went to like Christian private school, and like, church on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, like just a lot of church. When I was in England, I go to like Jehovah Witness Kingdom Hall. Just spent a lot of time going to different churches. And the irony was my mom was not very religious. As I've gotten older, I realized for Caribbean people, church is like free daycare, so you end up going to a lot of church. But my mom asked me one day, she's like, are you are you gay? Are you? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, yeah, like so excited. Like she's like, you cannot be, and that was kind of like the beginning of what brought me to a place where I was no longer at home. It was kind of like, stop doing this thing because you can't be
Mhm.
gay. You're my kid, you can't be gay. Um, or don't be here. And really, I don't really think she thought I would, but I'm a Leo. I'm a Leo sun, uh, Cancer moon, Leo
Oh
rising. So I'm just a
Lord.
Leo. Okay, and I'm emotional. I'm irrational, emotional. So, at 15, she's kind of like, and I was like, bet, got my little two things that I owned and was out of there. And yeah, like I decided very early on that I wouldn't compromise my truth, my integrity, the way I felt for anyone. And I remember very, very young, my mom always used to say this thing to me. She's like, why can't you just not tell anybody? Like,
Mm.
why can't you just hide this thing until later, until you
Right.
have to let somebody, like, it was always like that. And I just felt like that was so deceptive and so dishonest, And so, no, very early I made the choice that I don't want to hide. I don't want to hide
Right.
anything about myself. And I think that that's kind of continued to be the way I show up in the world. I just don't want to hide. Like, I'm very forthcoming. If you meet me, I just say what I'm thinking. Because I just don't want to hide. And if my mother at 15 could teach me a lesson like, hide or be denied, well then deny me.
Okay. We like that. Hide or be
Hmm.
denied. Deny me
Hmm.
because you're gonna
Hmm.
walk in your truth regardless. So I love to hear that. While
100%.
you were navigating this and dealing with your mother, questioning your sexuality, dealing with homelessness, moving through, this kind of murky landscape of a world, was there anybody in particular that kind of reached out, took a hand, brought
Yeah,
you in,
my
and said, "Hey"?
my mom would call me all the time. She would call me all the time, like, come home. And I'd be like, can I be gay? No. All right, bet. My grandma would call me all the time. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I make sure to tell the story in full as much as I can, that, like, I came from a really supportive, loving environment, and I
Right.
think that, everyone gets everywhere in their own way, but there was never an issue of me feeling, um, I guess because I just grew up in such like a loving space. Even being homeless, like now I look back and I was like, Rooks, that was crazy. But I just had this faith that like life would just protect. People were so kind to me. I tell this story often of like going to this coffee shop one time that was across the street from my house. And this guy saw me a couple nights in a row. And a really big part of the reason I was homeless was because here in Canada, if you're under 16 and they realize that you're not at home, you have to go to foster care. Like it's immediate.
Mm.
They just
Mhm.
kind of take you and you're put in the system. And so I didn't want to go to foster care, so I did a really good job of trying to hide it because I still wanted to go to school. So I would still go to school every day. And so I remember sitting at a coffee shop near my right across the street from my house, near my high school. And one day this guy, the guy that worked there, he's like, "What are you doing in here?" Because they used to smoke inside, right? "What are you doing in
Mhm.
here?" I have my uniform. I have my uniform with me. And I was like, "Yeah, just telling him my story." This guy gave me the keys to his van. And like in my
Mhm.
young 15-year-old mind, like this man gives me the keys to his van and like he's like, you can sleep in my car. So I go and I sleep in this guy's car. He gets off at like 5 in the morning and he's like, I gotta go home, like I have another job. Like that he's like, but I'll stay here and sleep with you till 6. And me and this man are in this car. He has his car on, he's wasting his gas, and this man just lets me
Wow.
sleep and then drops me to school. Like there was just always this energy. Now I look back and I'm like, that's crazy. Anything could
Absolutely.
have happened.
And we do not recommend that, ladies and gentlemen.
Do not argue, but there was just this my whole life I've just had this like insane faith around like being protected, being cared for, being okay. And I think that, so many people did reach out to me, and I think if I ever had the thought that I wasn't okay, I probably would have gone to my grandma's house or gone to my aunt's house. I just went back home and pretended, but there was just something in me that was like, yo, you're good, you know? And
Right.
maybe that was a part of the journey I need to have, but I have to shout out my mom for raising me in a way that allowed me to be homeless and not broken, to be
Good.
out my house, but not without like being rooted. I knew
Right.
myself. At 15, I was like, yo, I want to wear Davucci. Do you remember Davucci? I want to wear Pepe jeans, okay? Y'all
I'm
can put me
cracking
no
up.
apple bottom. I don't know what was Beyonce's thing
Oh,
called again?
derriere, derriere.
I don't know Darion jeans, okay? Give me the Gucci, give me some, Rockaware. Like I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew how I wanted to show up in the world, and I felt like anything else would compromise that, and I wasn't willing to do that.
Okay, respect. Definitely respect.
Hmm.
And it shows throughout some of the successes in your life that there were things that you just weren't willing to compromise on. So let me ask you this. Like I said, when I met you, you were owning, you were the founder and you are operating still on a day to day basis, Sandbox
Hmm.
Studios, based out of Toronto. A
Hmm.
huge, I guess, how would you classify, what kind of studio would you classify it as?
You know, when I first started Sandbox, everyone was like, Rooks is not gonna work. Canada doesn't make enough like urban music at the time, or like, rap, hip hop, R&B, whatever. Like it's just not gonna work. And I would classify Sandbox as just that, a sandbox. It was one of the first spaces that just allowed black creatives in the city to come together and just like play together. No, like, are we working together? Are we like, where's the money at? Like, are we in the same clique? It was just like, yo, you just wanna be creative, you just wanna explore yourself through creativity, go to Sandbox. And so whatever that was for, whether that was for film, or you're doing an audiobook, or you're like, teaching a class or a workshop, whatever it was, we were the space where black creatives were going to first. I was actually just having, not even just black creatives, but most people had their first session there. Like a song just came up on my Apple Music yesterday, and it was like Looney. And Looney
Mm,
had her first session at Sandbox. You know what I mean? Like,
wow.
when I think of like Jordan Manswell, I'm listening to a song the other day by Ryan Oster, who like has a song called With God. I'm like, I love this song. And then, Jordan posts like, love that I worked on this album. And I go through this album and it's like Jordan, like Sandbox. Like there's so many people that, like, if you look at them, it's like Sandbox. Like they started there,
Wow.
they had built their biggest relationships there. They spent a lot of time there, and it's just as a blessing to be able to be connected to so many incredible people from Toronto. Like I look at Eli Brown, who's an incredible producer now, killing it. Sandbox started. So,
Hmm.
these were people that on a regular basis, were in this space, considered it home. And it's such a blessing for me to look at the industry now and see what's been created and be like, a lot of people spent their formative time, at Sandbox or with me, as a manager. I was Savannah Ray's first manager. You know what I mean? Like, just the
Wow.
list goes on of all the cool ways and interactions and lives that have been touched. So it's just a blessing to me to just be a part of all these stories.
So let's talk about that a little bit, actually, because what was life like before Sandbox? I know you just mentioned you were a manager. I know you've managed artists. Was there a time where you actually worked in a corporate space or a more structured environment, or did you just go straight from manager to entrepreneurship?
Um, I'm gonna shout out. So I was a security guard. That's how I got into music. Like, at first,
Okay.
I worked in the underground economy. So, I was working in
Okay.
the underground economy until about the age of 18. I got a situation happened, some sense got knocked into me, and I was like, all right, I need to be done with this lifestyle. Joel Santana. Look at Jim Jones now. I try to be like him then. You know what I mean? So it's like, I
Lord.
just one day woke up and was like, yeah, it's not for me. And I had a friend, shout out Jack A. I'll never forget. She's like, yo, come do security with me. And I said, bet. And at the time, like, you need a woman security guard. So we were getting paid way more than the guys because we needed to pat down
Mm,
the girls. So it's like, coming from the underground economy, anything else looks like peanuts. Like, you're
right.
like, how many days you gotta work for this money? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
so, but it was dope because I was with my friends, it was around music, and I met the incredibly talented Layla Day, who introduced me to my very first artist that I got to work with. And it was
Nice.
all kind of like, things are symbiotic when you're just following your spirit. And like, shout out KR Moore. He had just opened up a studio, and then I met Layla, and then Layla put me on to another artist, and I started managing her. And she kind of blew up and we took off. So we took off and we were doing incredible things long before there was a Sandbox. I actually opened up Sandbox not to be a studio, but just to be a studio she could record at until we were out of here. I got
Oh,
tired of
wow.
going to studios where, she's incredibly talented, and she'd have a lot of vibrato. And I remember we finally went to this really dope studio, very expensive studio. Um, and this engineer there was like, can you stop like doing this? Like, can you just sing the notes straight? And something just went off in my mind, like, you want this soul artist to sing the notes straight? Like, he was so irritated by her because he didn't understand the music. And in that moment, I was like, oh, we never going back to a studio. Like, I'm gonna open up a studio. So I opened up a studio.
That's kind of dope. So you had an artist
Hmm.
and you opened up a studio just so she can have a
Yeah,
place to record.
just so she could record. That was it. That was it for me.
And
I
so
was just
how do
like,
you expand from there?
so she fired me. It was like this big.
Okay.
So this is the thing about life and like pivoting sometimes. So I open up a studio so she can record. And then obviously other people are like, yo, Rooks, let's work, let's do some stuff, let's get together. So, people are coming to the studio. She can't record 24 hours a day. So other
Right.
people are coming, other artists are engaged who are like, Rooks, can you manage me? Can you help me develop? Can you do this? That did not make her very happy. And so
Mhm.
I opened the studio in November, December, January. She fired me in February. 4 months of
Oh
other people
wow.
talking to me. She was sick of it. She was sick of rightfully so. I was young. So I was overwhelmed. Like everybody wanted to work with me. And I was busy. I was busy. And there was a lot of the thing in music, like you do something once when you're coming up as an artist, you can't do that
Mhm.
show again next year. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was really helpful for me to be able to have other people to be like, oh, she already did this. You can do this. Oh, that person already did. You get. So I was understanding that I needed to build, a farm of artists that I could pull on whenever people were coming to me with gigs. So
Right.
didn't work out. Didn't make her very happy. But yeah, like that's that's how I actually got into Sandbox. Like I had no desire to have a recording studio. Just wanted to finish her album.
Wow. Okay, so
Mhm.
you're not a musician yourself. Are
Not a
you an
musician.
engineer yourself?
That is what I'll say. I'll say that like I can engineer enough to record a song. I can mix enough that it doesn't hurt your ears.
Okay.
This is what I was, I have a great ear for music. I grew up in church. Um, I know how to arrange things. Like often artists like let me listen to their final cut of their album. Not even just like this should be a C or a D or transpose this, but like what's the feeling that we're gonna give the end user? I think I'm very good at the user experience, whether that's like on a website or an album, is like what do we want somebody to create? What do we want them to feel? And so yeah, I think I just have a great ear for that. Like what are we trying to convey? What are we trying to get across? And so I would say that that is my secret sauce in music.
Okay. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about once you made this decision to start Sandbox. You say, "Hey,
Mhm,
I have this artist. I need a place for her to record. I'm sick of going to these other places. I'm not really an engineer myself. I have a decent ear, but I want her to have the best of the best." How do you actually start it? Like what, like you need
yeah.
mics, you need equipment, you need computers, you need to hire an engineer. Like
I
all of
went
these things cost money.
Yeah. So
So
I went to KR Moore, who originally had the studio. I was like, bro, what are you doing? And at the time he was washing cars at Enterprise. I said, it can't be as good as I'm about to go drop a bag. And I did. I dropped like I think like $7,000 on everything. And
right.
from couches to the TV to changing the carpet to like all of it. And I said, I just need you to pull up, and God bless KR. He did, and we took a risk, we took a chance. And yeah, we got started.
Amazing. Very cool. So COVID 2019 happened, right? And I always like to ask entrepreneurs this question, especially people who were able to make it through the pandemic. In my lifetime, like we talked about, I've been a part of a recession. I've been a part of now a global pandemic. And as an entrepreneur, anything can affect your business that you have absolutely no control over.
100%.
Canada was extraordinarily strict when it came to COVID regulations, people sharing space, to the point where apparently they had police coming around making sure that nobody was operating, nobody was in business. And
It's
so,
real.
how did you survive 3 years of that? You guys did 3 years, right?
You know, um, I think one of the challenges for us in Canada was, first of all, the entertainment industry was hit the hardest. It was the last to bounce back. Festivals, anywhere
Mhm.
thing was there's a gathering, right? Concerts, live music is a big part of it. Um, and it takes a lot of people to do one thing. So, if somebody's streaming and they want to do a concert, they gotta have somebody who's doing the live mixing, who's doing this. So because not a lot of people could be in the same space, really entertainment took a major hit. Um, there's a couple of thoughts about that. One is in 2019, I had wanted to fire everybody from the engineering side and just turn it into a rental only studio.
Okay.
I felt very badly about this, but I realized that the trend was going towards people having their own engineers because
Right.
recording was more accessible. So kind of when it happened, I was able to pivot because I had already been thinking about how to run a fully functional space where I didn't have to be there. I was traveling so much. The biggest issues I was having at Sandbox, they weren't actually the clients who rented the studio, is with clients who had our engineers, because then they complain about stuff or they want you to hear the music, or like, it's just too involved versus somebody just saying, yo, what's the door code, and going inside and then, using the space. So I preferred that. because it allowed
Right.
me to have more like freedom, you know? Um, so yeah, like when it kind of hit one, I think it dragged out so long in the sense that like we were told next month, next month, next month, for like 2.5 years. But I was really, I was fortunate and unfortunate. Sometimes I feel like I had about, I think like, like 250,000 on ice for Sandbox. It just
Mm.
like, my rent was like $15,000 a month. It was very expensive. I was downtown. You've been there. It was like the
Yeah.
core downtown area, so it's like I was lucky to have that much money on ice because I could like keep my business. But that's why I say sometimes I was unfortunate because it meant that I kept the business, right? Like
It's
I
right.
think I would have closed it a lot earlier, like a lot of other people, and kept my little 250,000 versus having
Right.
to start over again. And like, I exhausted a lot of my savings that Sandbox had because the goal always was to buy a building. So whenever
Mm.
Sandbox made money, I would put the money away because I'm like, I don't want to pay anybody else. I don't like this mortgage would be $7,000 a month. Why am I paying $15,000 rent? You know what
Right.
I mean? So for me, I was like, I don't want to pay any. So I was lucky to have that bit of a buffer. But other than that, like I think one of the biggest changes that happened for me during COVID was I fell out of love with music. I fell out of love with the music
Mm.
industry. My whole life I worked in music. Remember, I told you I transitioned from the underground economy to being the security guard and then jumping into
Mhm.
music. So during COVID, I learned things that I didn't know. Like I remember there was one specific day where I was like, "Is the sun always out this long?" Like, no, really, I had this thought, like because I'm waking up now, like 6 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm waking up early, and I'm like, the sun's been up for 12 hours today. Like I'm used to waking up at 1 o'clock. This is me being real transparent. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 11 o'clock, because the night before I'm at a club. And then I leave the club or the concert, or like I go to the concert with the talent, and then I go to the after party for the talent. Like it's not that I'm just partying, but this is a part of the entertainment industry.
Right.
And during COVID, I realized like, wow, I really like sleeping. I really like I like what? Who knew? Like I don't actually
Catching up
want
on
to
all the
drink.
rest you missed.
Yeah, like I'm like I actually don't want to drink anything. Like I can live
Right.
without alcohol. Like like a lot of stuff. Like I don't want to eat at 6 different restaurants in the span of 3 days. Have a
Right.
lunch meeting, a dinner meeting. Like there was just a lot of things that I realized that I just didn't like as much that I didn't realize that I didn't like because I'd never been in another environment. And so COVID really, it kind of jolted me in that because I also didn't listen to any of the music. That's what I found to be really interesting. Like a lot of the music I listened to in the clubs and I would know inside out. At home, I didn't want to listen to I don't know. I got the keys. I don't know what was out then, but like
Right.
like at home, I want to listen to like like hand pan music and like Janae Aiko and like just like calming music, things that make me feel really good and like even like I loved the dance hall so much. Like all of a sudden now, like some of the dance hall was so abrasive because it was just me.
Mm.
It's just me by myself. And it was like, I just want to feel good. And so I think it also
Right.
changed my relationship with like, what is the impact of music and how does music make people feel? And then I ended up doing a study about music during COVID, which I was not prepared to do, which was about, just the way where how music is stored in your mind. And I learned through research that music is stored in your memory. Like your brain doesn't know where to put music. So where it puts it is in your
Mm.
memories, like it's happened to you. So if you hear a song about, heartbreak and you've never had your heart broken, you're gonna feel that thing. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
If you hear a
Right.
song about and we know that on a very like real level until we start talking about music that is criminalized, right? So it's like
Right.
if you hear a song about a person going and like robbing somebody, your brain's having the same experience
Right.
that
No,
that
that's
you can
very
go
true.
and
And it's
rob somebody.
I was laughing talking with a group of friends the other day because I was thinking about some of the songs that I was singing at the top of my lungs when I was a kid and how I just was feeling it, like feeling Mary J. Blige. And how? How am I feeling her? Where, what point are we connecting and sharing an
Yo,
experience?
100%. I was
But
4 years old. I remember my mom slapped me up one time because I was singing, "Come into my bedroom, honey." What? And my mom's like, "What?" And I was like, "What I got? What?" She's like, "What you got?" I'm like, "Earrings, shoes."
you are stupid. Okay. Oh man. Yeah, no, music is definitely very interesting. And it's interesting how you have this extreme shift in your thinking, right? Where most people couldn't wait to get back to work, couldn't wait for everything to open back up. We were really just enjoying the fact that everything had kind of slowed
Hmm.
down.
Hmm.
Which takes us into one of the big themes about this show is how women pivot, right? Like, what does it look like to decide that one day you want to make a change, decide that one day you want to do something different, and you actually do that, right? And so
Yeah.
there are steps in between that. People are scared, overwhelmed a lot of times. And I know that you decided to start a church. And I want you to talk a little bit about starting this church, slowing down from music, thinking about the things that you're digesting on a regular basis from a music perspective, and saying, you know what, I want to lean more into ministry and not music now.
I think one of the things that I realized during COVID, I had put out this thing called the Discipliner in my book. Um, and I realized during COVID that I actually had a lot of influence. That it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that I had influence because I was connected to celebrities or I personally have a lot of influence. And to this day, I still have a lot of influence. And I had gotten a call from a liquor brand during COVID that was like, "Yo, we're gonna give you anywhere between 50 to 100K to post drinking, like our alcohol for the
Mm.
next, month. There's a ton of budget because we can't do events." And I was like,
Mm.
you get that email. I'm like, whoa, 50 to 100K, like, and I'm just like,
Absolutely.
and I'm starting to think about like, where will I put the liquor? Will I put it like this? Like, you know what I mean? I'm just exactly, and
What are we doing?
yeah, yeah. But and then there was this moment where I was like, Rookz, you don't even drink this stuff. Like there was
Mm.
like this real moment where I was like, I'm trying to make content because I'm trying to figure out like, because when you respond, you send back what your pitch ideas will be, and I try to make content, and like I remember at one point, like I was like doing this and got my lips, I was like, oh, you know what I mean, like, and I'm like, yo, Rooks, you suck, like, I was like, there's this moment in myself where I'm like, you don't even do this, and it's
Right.
like. I had felt that feeling before. I felt that feeling before when I worked with this really big, huge brand, like, and I won't say their names because the company in of itself was so kind to me. But I remember like thinking to myself, like, I don't really care about, I don't care about this stuff. Like,
Right.
I don't care. And like, I'm putting out into the world that this thing is so important to me and these things are so important to me. And like, there was just this moment where I was like, I can't use my influence for this. Like I
Mm.
can't use my influence for money. I can't use my influence to be dishonest. I gotta use my influence for real stuff. I gotta use my influence to share what made me me, you
Right.
know? And I remember
Absolutely.
like there was this one interview I was doing on television and they said, like, how did you and I said, honestly, they're like, how did you go from this to this to that? My resume is crazy. Like there's a lot of stuff that I've
Mm-hmm.
worked on that people don't even know. And like I was like, God. And they're like, what? And I was like,
Mm.
yeah, I just listened to my spirit. They're like, what? I'm like, I'm not that smart. Like I'm really not that smart. Like I just kind of be sitting here and then I hear something and I'm like, let's do it. Like I'm
Right.
obedient. I trust what I'm hearing inside. I just trust it so much. That I just act on it. I'm clairvoyant and I trust my discernment enough that when I hear something inside of me that is unprovoked, I know I'm connected to source. So I just got to do that. And so during COVID, I like, I started talking more about faith and it started inviting a conversation that I wasn't prepared for about like sexuality and faith and the intersectionality of that. And then I started talking to other people in general about like, I had a baby or like, church just doesn't make me feel good or I had this bad experience at church and like, like and I was like, there has to be a place for these alt people to exist. Like there has to be a place for alt people to gather. And so I started this thing called Alt Gather, and
Mm.
it was really just born out of the idea that like faith is a part of the human experience. Like I don't
Right.
care how you chop it up. We all have faith. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to have a religion, but we all have faith. And when we don't have faith, you see what happens to a person. Destitute,
Absolutely.
right? Like without the faith that you can get through something rough, like, yo, this thing's happening, but I'm gonna get on the other side of this. I know I'm gonna get on the without that thing inside of you, life becomes very um it becomes dim, right? Like it becomes
Mm.
like, oh, I hate this job, but I gotta go there. And you just do the job and you go home, then you microwave the food, and then like you without faith, there's almost no hope, right? You have
Right.
hope and faith, these things work in tandem and that's how we create. That's where we exist from. So yeah, during COVID, like my energy shifted. I was like, I don't really want money. I don't really want material things. I don't really need any more external validation. I had to start validating my internal self, and that meant that I started having different conversations. My language changed. What music could be played around me changed. How I started eating changed. Like it just was like this whole serious relationship with discipline. And then I went to go see Bishop O.C. Allen, who's actually located in Atlanta, and he changed my life. He's like,
Mm.
"That's like I don't know what you're talking about, kid. Being a pastor is crazy, but like I was like, I heard it, and I heard to come talk to you." And he's like, "Well, talk to me in 6 months." And the very next day, he told me I was gonna be a pastor in front of his whole church. And I said, "Yo, what
Oh
happened?" He said,
wow.
I heard it too. He's like, "I'm obedient to source too." And so it shifted my whole life
Wow.
in one moment to just walk in a completely different direction. I'm not a very religious person. I'm not a very like yeah, I'm not,
Okay.
but I do genuinely believe that a quintessential experience the human condition requires is faith building. And so,
Mm.
I think my job really has been as a pastor at All Gather has been more about like, how do we reflect in a way that allows us to encourage and grow our faith? How do we speak in a way that we're speaking to the situation that we want to see happen? Like a lot of stuff we see at church, they all make sense scientifically. People know that like if you speak something it'll manifest. That's not like a
Right.
spiritual practice. It's a scientific practice. Actually, any spiritual practice you believe in can be scientifically proven. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
and I think that is like that for me was a really interesting convergence of like all these ideologies for me because I grew up in church hearing like we don't believe in I'm Jamaican, so they say we don't believe in science. I'm like, yeah, we don't do seances. They're like science, like, I'm like so young as a kid, like why would we be doing seances? But realizing that the church has this idea, religion has this idea that science is separate than God from God. When we are science. You know what I mean?
Right.
Plants are science, and nature is science. Like science is the explanation of God's creation. So yeah, I just like went down like this crazy rabbit hole of like trying to understand life and who I want to be and how I want to live. And as things would get weird, crazy things would happen. Like I remember one time I heard like God tell me like, "Yo, just go to Atlanta for 3 months," and I'm like, I gotta work. The day before, I got a check for like 100 grand, like some
Mhm.
money that was owed to me, and I was like, oh, I can go to Atlanta for 3 months now. 100 grand
Right.
sounds like a lot, but when your expenses are like 30 grand a month, it's only 3 months worth of money. So it's like, I've just seen like how when you have faith and you have belief, that those
Mhm.
things come together and can change your entire experience. And so like, yeah, that's what I'm really passionate about now, like encouraging other people to experience that level of creation. That's why I always tell people create fate. Like you're creating what's gonna happen next. So
Mm.
be radically accountable for that. Create it. Don't
Mhm.
don't be passive to somebody else's creation. Be active in
Mm.
your own.
So what I'm hearing is it doesn't really matter what you want to do because you did mention how crazy your resume is, how you've done a bunch of different stuff, and we're definitely about to touch on that in a second. But regardless of when you're making these pivots, when you're making these transitions, it's always just about discipline, believing in yourself, and like staying true to the mission. And that's pretty much what I'm hearing you say. It's like at every point when you've decided to make a change, whether that's starting this church, whether that's starting Sandbox, whether that's doing this, you're remaining faithful to yourself. You're remaining faithful to whoever you pray to. But more importantly, you're also remaining disciplined as well.
Yeah, like I always tell people like I could be successful at selling hot dogs. It doesn't really make a difference. What humans are drawn to are each other. We're drawn
Mhm.
to one another. We're drawn to one another's energy. Um, and yeah, like I if I decide to do something, like I have no connection to the identities people give me, Like I'm not queer, I'm not black, I'm not, Jamaican, I'm not Canadian, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm living.
Mhm.
That's it. Like I'm an awareness. We're all just awareness. And the awareness that I have for myself and how I relate to the world, I'm just trying to deepen that awareness. And whether that's through, how I show up in my professional lens or how I show up in my personal lens to others, I'm actually just always trying to experience Rooks.
Right.
Like it's not about owning another business or having a church, or it's about like me getting to experience myself in another way. And I want to
Mhm.
experience like It's funny because I'm packing to go to Jamaica for 2 months because I have some homes out there and like I have a bunch of stuff I need to do. And today I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pack my Bible. Okay, I'm gonna pack my prayer mat because I do the duas every day, the Islamic duas.
Mm,
Like you know what I mean? Like I'm like, I read the Hermetic practice from the Kabbalion. I do so many things that for a lot of people they would feel like are contradictory, but I'm like, I was thinking about that today, like, man, like Rooks, you really are just like obsessed with like exploration, you know? Like
mm,
I love when I pray my duas. I love Islamic prayer. It's so
mhm,
reverent. It's
mhm.
so reverent and intentional that I love when I have a day and I pray 5 times a day. It's not to be Muslim. Just to
Absolutely. I'm
experience that
practicing
level
Ramadan
of,
right now.
yeah,
I
it's just
practice
that
Ramadan
level of,
every year, and I'm not Muslim.
there we go. It's just the exploration of discipline of self, And I think that we've allowed too many people to brand and industrialize faith, industrialize
Mm,
self-awareness,
mhm.
industrialize, exploration of self. But you can do that. You don't have to go to the. I'm not gonna say, but you don't have to go to Bali to find yourself. Get in the shower,
Right.
you know, let that water run on you, and ask Source the exact same questions, like, "Who should I be today?" And you might be surprised with the answers you get.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So let's circle back to this crazy resume. I want to talk a little bit about your time with the Toronto Music Association as the
Hmm.
CEO,
Hmm.
which is something that you did post the creation of Sandbox, post starting Sandbox. I want to talk a little bit about that. What does that transition look like? Like you've been your own CEO, founder of your own business, hired employees, dealt with all the challenges that come with being a business owner, and now you're in a more formal system
Hmm.
where even though you are the leader, you have these series of people looking to you. There's a board that you have to kind of run things by and communicate with, and that holds you quote unquote accountable to the goals. What was that shift like? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Were there some things about it you enjoyed, hated, and or loved?
Working in music for a really long time in Canada specifically, I realized the power of the union. And so when they
Mm,
headhunted me, at first I was like, this job's so boring and like whatever. They didn't have enough to pay me. But I saw the need for reform and the
mm,
value that, when I thought about the challenges a lot of my clients had at Sandbox, I was like, the union needs to change in order for that to change for this. I think a lot of times we don't understand how systems work, right? So someone's like, I can't even perform in the States. Is that, well, you can't get a visa. Well, you can't get a visa
mm,
because your union's job is to ensure that you get the visa. But you're not a
mm,
part of your union. You don't even know what the music union is, but they're the ones who have first right over the visa. So you got to go to them because they got to go to the AFM. And because I was always trying to explain these things to people, when the union hit me up and was like, yo, we're looking for a new CEO. Like, we want you. I was like, I don't know if you really want me because I see the challenges in your space and I want to fix them.
right,
So they hired me, and lo and behold, like the thing that's tough about working in environments like that is that no matter how fast you want to move, you will never move faster than the person that benefits most from things moving slow. And so, being in that space was very
yeah,
difficult
that's
for me
deep.
because most of the people that benefited from it's kind of like my experience in music as well, right? Like we look at black music and we're like, man, like you think back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, black artists were still making money when Drew Hill was talking about the fact that we're not making love anymore, or like somebody
Mhm,
sleeping in my bed, or Tevin Campbell was in love, or like,
mhm,
Kelly Price was like, you should have told me. Like when people were more vulnerable and honest, they were still making money in music. So it's not a matter of the fact that we want to hear this stuff, why it's being
right,
created. It's a matter of the fact that like it benefits somebody, right? So when I worked in
mhm,
music, a lot of times I would say like our biggest challenge in black music is that we won't critique black executives. Like, why you giving us this
mm,
garbage? Like what? Like it's
mhm,
so interesting now to be in a time where people are like, like Diddy this and Jay-Z that. But it's
mhm,
like if Diddy is like, let's just say for whatever reason is, you know, sexually deviant, is what however they're trying to paint him. And this is the person who has made all of your songs about how you relate to sex.
Hmm.
These are the songs that this is the frame of mind that you're coming from, right?
Right.
Like if the people who make your music about how to shop all came from poverty,
Hmm.
right? Like we have to be like more aware of like where is your circle of influence? Like where are these points of reference coming from? And I found the same thing in the union. It was like we're slow to move in the music space because a few people really win from
Right.
the way that we
Things are
let
going right
music
now.
go up. Exactly. And same thing in the union. It was tough because, I was like, yo, let's go, let's go, let's go. But the people who've been in the union for 40 years, they benefit from the way that things work. So it's
Right.
really like, I think for me, it was like the biggest wake up that like, one, I don't want to work for anybody ever again. Like, not like, Ani, I'll never forget. I looked at that check and I'm very transparent. Like, I think they pay me like 150 grand a year, right?
Okay.
In Canada, like that's a lot of money. In America, it's not. In Canada, it's like, yo, 150 grand. But the taxes are so crazy. I mean, I'll never forget. I looked at my first paycheck. It was like $6,000.
Oh
Okay,
my gosh.
that's how much I got paid. $6,000 for that month. And I remember going at the time. My partner, her office was across the hall, and I took my little T4 thing. I took it. I said, "Hey, um, I'm like, hey, do you pay these taxes?" And like, I was just going, and I was like, this how much I get paid to do all this foolishness? That was
That
like
is
the
crazy.
the biggest moment where I realized like, yeah, like I will always be a consultant. I would have made more money consulting for them, working less hours
Right.
than being in charge. And so I think that, yeah, for me, I realized like just from a pace place, it didn't work. And from a financial place, it didn't work. Like, I think that we have a lot of, when I talk to people, I'm like, yo, you work in corporate, I think that everything is different for everyone. But for me, I need to be able to say
Right.
what I'm going to say. Remember I said, either
Right.
deny me, but I'm going to come to this board meeting and I'm going to say like, this is not working like, we can't wait till people die for there to be
Right.
reform. You know what I mean? Like we have to, we have to do it now. And so, yeah, I was out of there in no time. Like I'm the type of person, like if I don't want to be somewhere too, I'm not gonna be there. So, God bless them. But I
Right.
do think that a lot of companies want to change, but they don't know how to change. And I think this is where like we all have to be more human. They don't know how to change where you gotta take when we talk about pivoting, you gotta be willing to take some away from the people who have,
Hmm.
and then make the people who don't have want to give some as well. There has to be this
Mm.
place in the middle, right? So like when we talk about us sleeping at the studio together,
Hmm.
I think it was like over a week we slept in the studio. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to the gym now. Let's go shower. Like, you know what I mean? We were
Yes.
like, it was over a week. I knew that I had to take some away of what I was making and give some of what I was making to Sandbox for me to get to where I want to go. And I think that a lot of times pivot is hard for people because they're not willing to find that balance. Like if you got
Mm.
to sell your car, but you
Right.
still make sure that you take the bus, it doesn't mean you stay home,
Right.
right? Like you got to find that balance of like, I got to take some away and I got to add some, and that's going to help me get to where I'm going. And so, yeah, like
Mm. What
that
are you
was one of the
willing to
biggest
give up
lessons.
to
Mhm.
get what you
And
want? It's a
invest
real question.
and invest
Hmm.
simultaneously. It's like
Hmm.
both at the exact same time.
I love that. Um, I love that, actually. I have a question that our guests are going to kill me if I do not ask you immediately. Everybody wants to figure out how to do these speaking engagements. All right. How do you
Okay.
do speaking engagements? You've done so many speaking engagements. And I have a fun fact that I'm going to hold to the end about one of those speaking engagements. But you've done so many speaking engagements, various consulting jobs. How do you pitch them? Do they pitch you? What was that do you remember the very first time you got the opportunity to get on stage and how you acquired that opportunity?
So when I went back to high school, I was like 18 and I wanted to play on the basketball team. I was 17, and I wanted to play on the basketball team. And my principal was like, listen, you've gone to like this many high schools now. You want to be on this basketball team? You got to join this program.
Mhm.
And I'm like 17. I'm still kind of a part of the underground economy. I come to school with like two pairs of shoes. I'm swapping my shoes out at lunch. Like
Mm.
that's how unnecessary I was, right? And like
Mm.
he's like, you gotta do this thing. So I did this thing called Respect in Schools Everywhere. It's called Rise.
Mm.
And they're like, you gotta be, so it's like me and a bunch of um, kids that were not very high on the social ladder at school, you know?
Right.
And but because I was gay and I was like one of the few openly gay people in the school, in many ways I dealt with a lot of the social stuff that they dealt with. I just happened to be an athlete that dressed really well and like,
Mhm.
you know, was kind of so, but I still dealt with a lot of that stuff, right? So I had this like real connection with them. Like I really like I was like, I know what it feels like to be bullied. Like even though they're all scared, like come into the room and they're like all trying to like jump up and like, you know, which chair do you want, Rooks? Like, you know, it's like I'm cool. Like I identified with feeling out of place so much that I really like fell in love with being in this space, you know, and like
Mm.
all of a sudden all the other basketball players and cool kids were joining this program. So it's like a bunch of cool kids now, like, you know, other kids that would never normally talk. And now this it shifted the school's energy so much that the principal came to me and said, there were 20 fights last year this time. There's been one.
Mm.
There's
Oh
been
wow.
one since like you started coming to the school and you've shifted the atmosphere so much. And my principal just started talking to me about like, do you know what it means to be able to shift an atmosphere like this? Like you're behind two grades, like, you know, you're not academically excelling. Like even right now, like you don't go to class and you're every teacher's favorite student. Like you shift rooms and like, you know, I'm grateful that you came to this school. The school has changed so much since you've been here. And he's like, I hope you stay involved in the program. And then the program was like, yo, you really like we need you on our board. And that's when every
Mm.
so the news came to the school and then I got to speak to the news and like somebody asked me one day like why did you start doing this? And I said I just want to speak for people who can't speak. And
Mm.
you know, I just that's literally I remember what it felt like to be out of my house and like for my mom to not understand how I felt and like you know so from that moment on, I just like I joined the board there, and then I started doing way more news articles and the circuit, and like you know, then I went from one thing to another, and then I was speaking everywhere, and you know, again, shout out my mom. I was really articulate and really able to communicate properly and well, and from a place of I think I communicated through an open place that was, and still to this day, I'm like that. Nothing is anybody's fault. It's like, I want
Right.
to be radically accountable. I want to be aware of what's going on. And I want to be able to look at a situation and see where all parties are responsible. You know what I mean? So I would go into conversations that were really heated
Mhm.
about like, you know, racism in schools and like, you know, queerness in schools and like you know we had something in Ontario called uh the zero tolerance policy, which was like if you got into a fight you were immediately expelled, so a lot of black
Mm.
kids got expelled, right? So I would like talk on behalf of that and like so I just got well known for being a public speaker because I wanted to speak up for things and for people, and from there just kind of kept growing. And so yeah, I've never pitched myself one time. I've definitely spoken over more than 100 speaking gigs since I started. Like I probably done at least 600-700 speaking gigs. I've traveled all over the world. Like talked to like a lot of the schools that I went to that were really problematic. I make it a thing to like whenever they call me to come speak at those schools, I'm gonna go speak at
Mm.
schools that where a lot of kids look like me. That was really where I wanted to start speaking first, and I would spend a lot of time. I'll get off of a plane and go to a high school, you know, because I wanted people to know, like, yo, look at me, figure it out. You know, it doesn't matter,
Mhm.
like, figure it out, you can do it. So, yeah, I just think my desire to get my message out, like you and Universe are always working together, you and Source. So like if you have something to say, you will get a soapbox, right?
Mm.
And a lot of times people are frustrated that they don't get the opportunities, but you're not saying anything. You're not
Right.
saying you gotta and I say things that other people don't want to say. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I was talking like D1 before D1 was talking like D1. You know what I mean? Like so you got to be able to deal with, and I think a lot of people want to speak so that they can be heard, but they don't want to speak so that they can create impact, right? So they can
Mm.
create change. And I don't speak unless I think that it's going to do something impactful. You know, I've turned
Right.
down a lot of speaking gigs to this day. People call me like, "Can you speak on this panel?" No. Why? Well, you
I
know,
feel
to
so
talk about,
lucky.
well, because I know you're impactful.
Yeah.
You care about impact. Like, you know, my
I
mom used to
feel.
tell me as a kid, don't do anything if it's not edifying. And I
Mm.
still live by those words. Like, if it's not edifying,
Mm.
I don't, nobody else needs to hear my voice at all.
Right.
Like, I'm good.
Well, for all of our high school and college kids out there listening,
Mhm.
take this as a true testimony. It is never too soon for you to be a part of your community. for you to for you to make impact, for you to find something that matters to you and to latch onto it. It's never too early to do that. So whether you're in high school, whether you're in college or starting your career or further along in your career, it is never too early for you to kind of find your space and lean into that. And to your point, Rook, find your voice. What do you want to say? What do you want to get out into the world and hone that and develop that and have something of value to say. And people will listen. Eventually, people will listen if you stay consistent. So very, very
100%.
cool. All right, we're gonna start wrapping this up now. So I have a couple more questions for you. One of the questions is, if you looking back on your career, do you wish, is there any decisions you wish you made sooner?
Looking back on my career, I wish I had made the decision to shut up more. Like, not everything needs to be a fight. It took me a long time to learn that the polarization I would have from people, like with people, like, oh, this person is like this. When you actually get to spend time with them, you understand why. And so, some of the decisions I would make about who I'd work with, who I wouldn't work with, what I was drawn to was just based off of sound bites, sound bites in my
Right.
own mind. So be quiet, listen more.
Mm,
I think the other decision I would have made was to go to school. I would have chosen to
mm,
go to school for business, not because I think it would make me better at business, but I do think that a lot of times we try to do things so outside of the system sometimes. Like I was already said when I started becoming really successful in business, I should have went to school for business then, because I think that it would have
mm,
really helped me scale, but it would also help people take me more seriously. Um, work with what can help work with you, you
right.
know? And the last thing would be, it took me a long time to realize that like no what other people think is like so fake. No matter if they think a good thing or a bad thing about you.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are only experiencing you through themselves. And based
Mm-hmm.
on where they're at, they're experiencing you. So if somebody loves to party and you're loving a party, they like you. But
Mm-hmm.
when they don't want to party anymore and you still love to party, they won't let. It's not about you actually. It's actually always
Mm-hmm.
about that person. And so be your real self. Be your true self all the time, because for every person you lose, you'll gain a person for being who you authentically are.
I
Um,
love that.
and yeah, like I think that if I had learned that much earlier, I think I would have been onto some like very different things much earlier than I started.
Mm, I love that. I love that. All right, so we're gonna get down to our last two questions, and I cannot let this show end without asking or bringing up our fun fact. How in the hell did you end up opening for Barack Obama,
Here's a very interesting
our
story.
United States president?
So shout out the Economic Club of Canada. They reached out to me, and this is why I'm going to tell you that it's very important for you to do what you love doing. So they
Mm,
reached out to me in a month where I had maybe like 20 other speaking gigs. Now my lowest speaking fee is like $2,000. Half an hour, it doesn't matter, like $2,000. And my manager at the time said, "Yo, we got this request. The pay is 250." She's like, "I'm gonna tell them I'm not gonna do it." So she tells him, "Hey, you're not gonna do it." And then the next day, my spirit was like, "How dare you think that you don't talk because you ain't getting paid?" I'm
right.
sitting at my desk because you're not getting paid what you want. So I went in my email and I went and I messaged them back and I said, "You know what? We are actually able to show up that day. Whatever you want to pay is cool." Da 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 da. That
Mm,
speaking gig turned into partnering with the Economic Club of Canada, Create Fate times Economic Club of Canada, bringing Barack Obama here and me opening for him. And so,
wow.
I always think about that. That like my manager had said no because it wasn't the right money, but my spirit said yes because it's what I'm gifted to do, right? And
Mm,
so I followed my desire to speak, my desire to share what's in my like to speak to the Economic Club of Canada. I went on the website. It was very white, right? And I was
mm,
like, imagine me pulling up with my little toque and my little chain and talking about money. And people also being very surprised at like how much I know about economics and investing and real estate, which is what I'm getting into now. And like, all the things that for also people to realize maybe I was a little wealthier than they even thought. You know what I mean?
right.
Because I wanted to reshape in that room what what black wealth might look like. You know what I mean?
Mm,
What money might look like in this space. And so I said yes to the higher version of myself, and that
mm.
turned into the relationship with Obama.
So let me get this right. You get offered this engagement, this opportunity, and
Mhm.
you and manager both are like, no, money's not good enough.
No, I
This is
was like,
not
no,
the
the manager only.
manager says no.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Manager says no. This is not the opportunity to speak for Barack Obama. This is the relationship, the bridge that was built to get to that opportunity. And that
Mhm.
is also very important too. How important relationships can be to how our success turns out, and how our future.
Mhm.
So everything might not be immediate. Like I met you. We weren't doing work together. We weren't making jobs. All of a sudden, our friendship built. We stayed together. We built a level of
Mhm.
trust with each other. So that when
Mhm.
opportunities present themselves, it's like, oh, I could call Rookz. I needed somebody to be on
Mhm.
my show. I could call Rookz,
Mhm.
right? I
Mhm.
can,
Mhm.
so these relationships might not be that one thing, that one time, but they ultimately build into creating opportunities where you had the opportunity to speak and open for our best president, in my opinion.
Relationships are the only form of money. And I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people, if time is money, then the only thing you need is time. And the only things that have time are people. So the only thing you
Mm-hmm.
need are people. Like I have no affinity for money. I have no affinity for resource in that way. But relationships, like you could have I've seen it myself backstage. Somebody comes, they're a billionaire's kid. They want to get into the green room. It don't matter if you're a billionaire's. It does not matter. You're not gonna cut a Zell right now of like they don't want you back there. You know what I
Right.
mean? So money does not give you access. Power
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always give you access, but a relationship will always give you access. And so, prioritizing having really healthy and honest, transparent relationships with people goes a long way.
Absolutely. Oh, I love this. Well, this has been amazing. We will close out with the last question. The people want to know, what do you have next? What is planned
So,
for Rookz?
so Rook's Realty, I own a ton of
I love
properties
that.
all over the world. And, this year I was deciding like, should I sell them? Should I sell them? I have some mortgages that need renewing. I have not had a lot of time to enjoy the life I built. This year,
Mm,
I decided to close down all my brick and mortar businesses and just focus on my one consulting business where we do everything from strategic planning to marketing, PR, to the brand development. So I was like, I'm just gonna work it unsigned and continue to consult, and then I'm gonna get my real estate license. So right now, I'm actually gonna go study for my exam that's tomorrow, to get my real estate license so that I can actually do what I really enjoy doing, which is talking about real estate, looking at real estate. I go on the real estate website almost every like how people go on like Fashion Nova. I'm like on
mhm.
realtor.com like, what's Costa Rica saying today? Like I just love real estate. I love real estate development. And I'm really excited to move in that energy because I think the other piece about for our community, for especially like for young people who are listening to this, in order for information to pass on to our generation, we need to do jobs that the previous generation did. So like insurance
Right.
brokers, realtors, mortgage brokers, the things that we think are corny maybe,
Hmm.
most moguls were made from those industries. They're
Yep.
made in insurance, they're made in real estate, they're made. So we need to have that information as well so that when I'm talking to Anya, I'm like, yo, Anya, do you know next year there's gonna be one, two, three, four, and we can start making the investments and the moves that we need to make. But at our age, we need people that are in our space, our peers doing some of the foundational work so that we can have access to the information. So I'm excited to be able to share with my peers, like, what's going on in real estate so that people can make smart moves. Nothing is inaccessible. I hate when people talk about how inaccessible they think real estate is. It comes
Right.
with a little bit of sacrifice, but it goes a long way. So yeah, Brooks Realty 2025.
Okay. I love it. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining. We truly appreciate it, Rooks. I am so grateful to have had you on the show today. You are an amazing guest, as always, amazing person, beautiful spirit, and I love you to the moon and back. Other than that, we'll make sure to drop all links, signatures at down in the bio. So make sure you check that out. You'll be able to follow Rooks throughout this entire journey and see what happens with Rooks Realty and what happens next. And thank you.
All right, I love you too.
All
Thank
right,
you so much for
sis.
having me. All right, talk to you soon.
Baby.
Bye.